Lucas had always considered Eric his closest friend, someone who knew him better than anyone else. They had grown up together, sharing childhood secrets, teenage dreams, and now, as young adults, the bond between them seemed unbreakable. But that was before Helena came into the picture. Helena was everything Lucas had never expected. She was bright, outgoing, and effortlessly beautiful. She had a laugh that could light up a room, and a smile that made you forget about the world. She was perfect for Eric, and Lucas could see that. She was the kind of girl he would never be able to have, not in the way she deserved. Yet, despite his better judgment, Lucas found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. It all started innocently enough. Eric and Helena were dating, and Lucas was happy for his best friend. He had no reason to feel anything other than joy for their relationship. After all, Eric had always been there for him, and he would never want to come between them. But as he spent more time with them, something began to change. Helena's laughter, the way she spoke to him, the way she looked at him. It was as if there was a connection between them that neither of them could deny. At first, Lucas tried to brush it off. It was just a fleeting feeling, something that would pass with time. But it didn't. Every time they all hung out, every time they laughed together, Lucas couldn't shake the growing tension in his chest. He tried to ignore it, to suppress it. But the more time he spent with Helena, the more impossible it became to ignore. The worst part was that Helena seemed to sense it too. There were moments when their eyes met, a fleeting glance, and something unspoken passed between them. Lucas could feel it, and judging by the way she would look away quickly, he knew she could feel it too. But neither of them said anything. After all, she was with Eric, and Lucas was supposed to be her friend. No one wanted to be the one to ruin the perfect balance that had existed between them for so long. And so, Lucas continued to hold on to his feelings in silence. But deep down, he knew it was only a matter of time before something had to give. He could either continue to live with this quiet ache in his chest, or he could confront it, risk everything, including his friendship with Eric, and possibly even his relationship with Helena. But that was a risk Lucas wasn't sure he was ready to take. The days that followed only deepened the unease Lucas had been feeling. He found himself drifting farther from Eric and Helena, though he never spoke of it. It wasn't something he could put into words, not even to himself. It wasn't like he was intentionally pulling away. It was just that every time they were together, the weight of his feelings seemed unbearable. The small moments of connection with Helena that had once felt so innocent now felt like an unspoken secret between them, one that neither of them acknowledged, but both felt acutely. It didn't help that Eric was so oblivious. He was always in high spirits, joking and laughing, completely unaware of the tension that hung thick in the air. To him, everything was the same. He was happy with Helena, and Lucas was, well, Lucas, his best friend. Eric had no reason to suspect that there was anything more to Lucas's behavior than a fleeting mood or a passing phase. But Lucas couldn't pretend. Not anymore. One evening, they all gathered at a local coffee shop, a familiar place where they'd spent countless hours talking about everything and nothing. It was supposed to be just like any other night, an easy, carefree evening of catching up. But this time, something was different. Lucas could feel it before they even arrived. It was like the air was charged with static, the kind that precedes a storm. As they settled into their usual booth, Lucas found himself unable to focus on anything Eric was saying. His gaze kept drifting to Helena, who was talking about her day, laughing at something Eric had just said. But Lucas wasn't listening to her words. He was listening to the rhythm of her voice, the way her lips curved when she smiled, the way her eyes sparkled as she looked at Eric. It hurt, more than he cared to admit. And then, for the briefest of moments, their eyes met. Helena's smile faltered just slightly, and Lucas's heart skipped a beat. She looked away quickly, as though caught in something she wasn't supposed to see. But the damage had already been done. In that fleeting moment, Lucas knew that she felt it too, that unspoken bond between them. And yet, they both remained silent, as if nothing had changed. Eric noticed the pause, but only in the way of someone who didn't know what was truly happening between his two closest friends. "What's up, you two?" he asked with a grin, clearly unaware of the tension that had escalated in the last few seconds. "You're both looking a little quiet." "Nothing," Lucas responded, forcing a smile. He tried to act casual, though the lie felt thick on his tongue. "Just tired, I guess." Helena didn't say anything, but she gave Lucas a quick, almost apologetic glance. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him to know that things were changing between them, slowly, but surely. As they continued to chat, Lucas found it harder and harder to focus on anything other than the growing distance between them. It was like a wall was slowly being built up, and he could do nothing but watch it rise higher and higher. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure whether it was a wall he had put up himself, or one that had been built by the invisible force between him and Helena. For the rest of the evening, the conversation flowed, but Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The connection he had once shared with Helena, something so innocent and pure, was now tainted by his own unspoken feelings, and it was only a matter of time before someone, maybe even Eric, would realize that things could never go back to the way they were. The next few days felt like they were moving in slow motion for Lucas. The lingering tension from that night at the coffee shop never quite left, and it seemed to hang over every interaction he had with Eric and Helena. He tried to distract himself by diving into work, throwing himself into tasks that required his full attention. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind kept returning to Helena, to that fleeting glance, that moment when everything between them seemed to shift, even if only for a second. It wasn't until the weekend that everything came to a head. Eric had suggested a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be the three of them, an escape from the noise of their everyday lives, a chance to relax and enjoy each other's company. Lucas had hesitated at first, unsure of what the trip would mean for him. Could he really spend an entire weekend alone with Helena and Eric without letting his feelings get in the way? It was too risky, but in the end, he agreed. After all, how could he refuse when Eric was so eager? How could he turn down the chance to spend more time with Helena, even if it hurt him? The drive up to the cabin was long, filled with casual conversation and laughter. But Lucas was distant. He couldn't focus on the conversation, not when every word from Eric felt like a reminder of how he was about to betray his best friend, even if he didn't say a word about it. Helena seemed to notice his quietness, but she didn't comment on it. She was too busy engaging with Eric, as she always did. The cabin was secluded, nestled deep in the forest with nothing but the sound of birds and the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. It was beautiful, peaceful, and perfect for a weekend retreat. The three of them spent the first evening cooking dinner together, laughing over jokes and the occasional teasing between Eric and Helena. But for Lucas, it was hard to enjoy the warmth of the fire, or the taste of the meal. His mind kept drifting back to the unspoken things between him and Helena. The way she laughed too freely when Eric was around. The way her eyes avoided his gaze when they were alone. Later that night, after dinner, they settled in front of the fireplace, the flickering light casting long shadows across the room. Eric, ever the extrovert, was animatedly telling a story about one of their childhood adventures, and Helena was hanging on every word, laughing at all the right places. But Lucas was numb, sitting in the armchair farthest from the fire, his gaze fixed on the flames. That was when Helena surprised him. She quietly rose from her seat and walked over to where he was sitting down next to him without saying a word. For a moment, the two of them were silent, the crackling fire the only sound in the room. "You okay?" she asked softly, her voice quieter than it had been all evening. Lucas didn't know how to respond. Could he tell her the truth? Could he tell her that he was struggling to even be in the same room as her, knowing what he felt, and knowing that it would never be enough? He looked at her, seeing the concern in her eyes, and for the first time in days, his guard came down. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just tired." Helena nodded, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something more. But she didn't push him. She just stayed there, a silent companion in the midst of his turmoil. In that moment, Lucas realized something that he hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just about his feelings for her. It was about the growing rift between him and Eric, about the betrayal he felt in his own heart every time he saw them together. How could he keep pretending everything was fine when it was slowly breaking him inside? And that's when it happened. That one moment, when the weight of everything became too much to bear. Lucas opened his mouth to speak, to say the things he had been holding inside for so long, but the words never came. Instead, he just stood up abruptly, unable to sit with his feelings any longer. Without a word, he excused himself and left the cabin, stepping out into the cold night air. He needed to get away, to clear his head, to figure out what he was going to do next. But as he walked into the darkness, away from the warmth of the cabin and the two people who had been the center of his world, he realized that he was about to face a choice that could change everything. The cold night air hit Lucas's skin as he walked away from the cabin, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't quite capture. His heart was pounding in his chest, a mixture of anger, guilt, and confusion. He had no particular destination in mind. He just needed to escape, even if only for a few moments. He needed to breathe without the weight of his feelings pressing down on him. The trees around him were tall and dark, casting long shadows in the moonlight. The forest was eerily quiet, and the only sound was the crunch of his boots against the frost-covered ground. His thoughts kept spiraling. Helena's laugh, her soft touch when she sat next to him by the fire, the way her eyes met his during those brief, fleeting moments. Everything felt so complicated now, and he was tangled in emotions he wasn't ready to deal with. Eventually, he found himself at the edge of a small clearing, the night sky wide and open above him. He stopped, staring up at the stars, trying to find some clarity in their vastness. But no matter how hard he tried, the only thing he could see was Helena, and the impossible situation he found himself in. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, wrestling with himself, until he heard the faint sound of footsteps behind him. His stomach dropped. He knew who it was without needing to turn around. He didn't need to look to know that Helena had followed him. "Lucas," her voice called out softly, the sound of her name in the still night making everything feel more real. "What are you doing out here?" He turned slowly, seeing her standing just a few feet away, her expression a mix of concern and uncertainty. She was bundled in a thick jacket, her hair tousled by the wind, but it was the way she was looking at him that stopped him in his tracks. There was no judgment in her eyes, no anger, just confusion, and maybe a hint of worry. "I needed to clear my head," Lucas said, his voice hoarse, trying to make the excuse sound plausible even though he knew it wasn't enough. Helena took a step closer, her eyes scanning his face as if searching for something she couldn't name. "Lucas, what's going on?" she asked again, her voice quieter this time, as though she feared he might break if she spoke too loudly. "You've been distant all weekend. It's like you're not even here with us." He could feel the tightness in his chest, the suffocating weight of everything he had been trying to hide. He wanted to tell her, to finally admit what he had been carrying for so long. But the words got stuck in his throat. What if saying it out loud made it all too real? What if it changed everything between them? Helena took another step toward him, her brow furrowing slightly. "Lucas, what is it? You can talk to me." And that was the breaking point. He couldn't hold it in anymore. All the pain, the frustration, the guilt, it came spilling out in a rush, faster than he could stop it. "I'm in love with you, Helena," he blurted, his voice shaking with the force of the confession. "I have been for a long time. And I can't keep pretending I'm okay with watching you be with Eric when I'm dying inside." There was a long silence after he spoke. The wind seemed to die down, and the world around them stood still, as if holding its breath. Helena didn't speak at first, her face frozen in shock. Her eyes widened as though she hadn't expected this, hadn't been prepared for the truth that was now hanging in the air between them. For a moment, Lucas wondered if he had made a terrible mistake, if he had just ruined everything. He had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. But then, slowly, Helena's expression softened. She blinked, almost as if processing the words, and then she took a deep breath. "Lucas," she began, her voice gentle. "I had no idea. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel like this." Her words hit him like a wave, and for a brief second, he thought he might collapse under the weight of them. But he didn't. Not because he was strong, but because he didn't know what else to do. "I didn't mean to," she continued. "But I've known something was off. I just didn't want to face it. I never wanted to choose between you and Eric. You're both important to me, Lucas." At that moment, it felt like everything inside him was unraveling. He wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that he wasn't angry, that he understood, except he didn't. He wasn't sure he could understand, not yet. Do you love me too?" he asked, the question lingering in the space between them, heavy and uncertain. Helena looked away for a moment, as though she was considering the question. When she met his gaze again, her eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow and hesitation. "I don't know, Lucas," she whispered. "I care about you. I always have. But I'm with Eric, and he's my choice. I don't want to hurt him either." It was the truth, and Lucas knew it. But it didn't make it any easier to accept. "I should go back inside," he said, his voice cracking. He needed distance, needed time to process what had just happened. Helena didn't stop him. She didn't try to hold him back. Instead, she simply nodded, watching him as he turned and walked back toward the cabin, his heart heavy with the weight of the conversation. And though the night was still, and the stars above seemed to shine brightly, Lucas couldn't escape the feeling that everything had changed, that no matter what happened next, things between him, Helena, and Eric would never be the same again. The following morning, Lucas woke up with a heavy heart. The night had been long, filled with restless thoughts and an ache that refused to fade. He didn't sleep much, and when he did, it was only to be haunted by fragments of Helena's words, the tenderness in her voice, and the painful truth she had shared. He stayed in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he had ended up in this tangled web of emotions. The sunrise outside the cabin window cast a soft golden light into the room, but it only made everything feel more surreal. The world was waking up, yet he felt frozen in time, stuck in a moment that had changed everything. There was a knock on the door. Lucas didn't need to answer to know who it was. Helena. He could hear the uncertainty in the knock, the hesitation. She had to be just as lost as he was. "Lucas?" she called softly from the other side of the door. "Can we talk?" He didn't respond at first. He wasn't ready to face her, not yet. But the guilt of ignoring her call was too much, and after a few moments, he stood up and opened the door. Helena stood there, dressed in jeans and a sweater, her expression tired but determined. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him, waiting. And for a moment, neither of them moved. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "I didn't mean to make everything so complicated." Lucas stood still, unsure of what to say. His mind was still swirling with thoughts, but he knew one thing. They couldn't keep running from the truth. He had confessed his feelings, and she had been honest with him about her own. There was no way forward if they didn't confront the situation head-on. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "But not here. I can't think straight with everything happening around us." Helena nodded in agreement, and together they stepped outside, walking silently toward a small bench that overlooked the lake behind the cabin. The air was crisp, the sun now fully risen, but the tension between them was thick and palpable. Once they sat down, Lucas took a deep breath. He had been holding back so much. But this conversation couldn't be postponed any longer. "Helena, I'm not angry with you. I want you to know that," Lucas began, his voice calm but firm. "I understand why you're with Eric. I get it. You love him, and I never meant to make you feel guilty about it. But this situation, it's not fair to anyone." Helena's eyes dropped to her hands, which were nervously twisting together. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now, I don't know what to do. I'm so confused, Lucas. I love Eric, but you've always been there for me, and it's tearing me apart because I don't want to hurt either of you." Lucas's heart ached hearing her struggle with the same uncertainty he had been feeling. He knew this wasn't an easy decision for her. It wasn't easy for him either. The feelings were too raw, too intense, and yet there was no simple solution. "You have to make a choice, Helena," he said softly, the words heavy with the weight of their truth. "You can't keep living like this, and neither can I. I need to know where I stand. You need to decide what's best for you." She looked at him then, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I know," she whispered. "I know I have to choose. But how do I choose between the two of you? How do I choose between the person I've been with for so long and the person who's been my best friend?" The pain in her voice made Lucas's chest tighten, but he knew what he had to say. He couldn't keep clinging to false hope, waiting for something to change that might never come. "You choose the one who makes you feel whole, Helena," he said gently. "The one who makes you feel like you can be yourself without holding anything back. That's the person you need to be with. Don't choose because you feel obligated or because it's safe. Choose because it's right for you." Helena's tears began to fall, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, she let them fall freely, the weight of the decision finally breaking through the wall she had built around herself. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Lucas," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can hurt him. I don't know if I can live with the guilt of that." The silence that followed was thick with the pain of the situation, but Lucas knew what needed to be done. The decision wasn't easy. He didn't know how it would turn out, but he couldn't let this go on any longer, not with the way he was feeling, not with the way things had unraveled between them. "You don't have to make the decision now," Lucas said softly, taking a deep breath. "But I need you to think about it. And when you're ready, you'll know what to do. I'm not going anywhere, but I need to know where we stand. And I think you need to know that too." Helena nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. The weight of it all was evident in her face. "I'll figure it out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As they sat there in silence, the breeze gently rustling the leaves around them, Lucas felt like he had just taken the first step toward a future that was still uncertain, but one that he hoped would bring clarity. The choice wasn't his to make. It was hers. But no matter what happened next, he knew that things would never be the same again. The days that followed felt like a blur, each one blending into the next, with an unbearable weight pressing down on Lucas's chest. He spent more time lost in his thoughts than actually engaging with the world around him. Every moment felt like a countdown, a ticking clock that was steadily leading them toward an inevitable conclusion. The tension between him and Helena remained unspoken, but it hung in the air, thick and palpable. Helena had asked for time. She needed time to think, to sort through the confusion in her heart. Lucas, although hurting, respected her need for space. He knew this wasn't a decision to be made lightly, and he didn't want to pressure her. But as the days passed, he couldn't help but feel the sting of uncertainty growing sharper. It was on the fourth day, during a quiet afternoon at the cabin, when Helena finally approached him. Her eyes were red, and there was a heavy sadness in her expression. But there was also something else. Clarity. "Lucas," she began softly, standing just inside the door, as though unsure whether to cross the threshold. "I've made my decision." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. His mouth went dry, and for a moment, he was paralyzed with fear. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear what she had to say, but he knew the moment had come. There was no turning back now. "Go on," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Helena stepped closer, her eyes searching his as if trying to gauge his reaction. She took a deep breath before speaking again, her voice trembling. "I've spent the last few days thinking about everything, and I realize that no matter how much I care about Eric, there's something missing. I've felt something with you that I've never felt before, and that scares me. But I can't ignore it anymore." Lucas held his breath. She paused for a moment, looking down at her hands as if gathering the courage to say what was on her mind. "I love you, Lucas," she whispered. "I've always loved you, in a way that goes beyond friendship. I can't deny it anymore." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The realization that the feelings they had both been hiding were real was overwhelming. But despite the joy he felt hearing her words, a deep sense of unease settled in his chest. Helena continued, her voice shaky but resolute. "But I can't do this to Eric. I can't betray him, and I don't want to be the cause of his heartbreak. I care about him too much, and I know what this would do to him." Lucas nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her conflict. He had seen the way she looked at Eric. He knew how much she valued their relationship, but it didn't make the truth any less painful. They were both trapped in a situation where love, loyalty, and guilt collided in an impossible tangle. "I understand," Lucas said quietly. "I never wanted you to hurt him. Or me, for that matter. I didn't want to put you in this position. But I understand." Helena looked at him, her eyes filled with regret. "I don't want to lose you, Lucas. But I also can't turn my back on Eric, not when I've been with him for so long. He deserves better than this." The silence that followed was deafening. The air between them felt thick, heavy with the weight of their unspoken thoughts. Both knew the reality of the situation, but neither knew how to move forward from here. "You need to follow your heart, Helena," Lucas said finally, his voice soft but steady. "And if that means staying with Eric, then I'll respect that. I won't make you feel guilty for choosing him. But I can't keep pretending like this is okay." Helena's lip trembled, and she took a step closer to him. "I don't want to lose you, Lucas. But I think I need to figure out what I want before I make any decision. I need to be sure that I'm not just running away from the truth." Lucas could feel the pain in her words, the confusion that still lingered in her heart. He wanted to be the one she chose, but he couldn't live in limbo forever, unsure of where they stood. He needed answers, and he needed them now, even if they would hurt. "I can't wait forever," Lucas said quietly, his gaze meeting hers. "But I'll give you the time you need. But you have to know. I can't just stand by if nothing changes." Helena nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. I know, Lucas. I'm sorry." Lucas felt his chest tighten, but he remained composed, forcing himself to let her go. "Don't apologize," he whispered. "You're not the one to blame. It's just the way things are." They stood there in silence, the weight of the moment settling heavily between them. Helena turned to leave, but before she stepped away, she paused and looked back at him. "I'll figure it out, Lucas. I promise." With that, she walked out, leaving Lucas standing alone in the room, feeling more lost than ever. He couldn't help but wonder how long he could keep holding on. How long could he wait for a decision that would tear all three of them apart? But he knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, the bond they shared would never be the same again.